Good morning, everyone. My name is Elza Ungura, and I'm a publishing researcher here at the National Library of Latvia. But for today, I'm going to be your conference moderator. We are very happy to meet and greet every one of you here today at the online conference of terminology. And we're glad to see that so many of you have taken the interest into this year's topic. Today, we will hear 8 presentations about various aspects relating to terminology in the context of that of cultural heritage institutions. And at the ending, we will also have a concluding discussion to summarize the pros and cons of linking terminology between institutions. There will be also a Q&A section after each of the presentations, where you will be able to ask your questions or give some comments and overall share ideas. Since there's quite a lot of you here today, we kindly ask you to submit all the questions in the chat section of the Zoom, and then after each presentation, I will deliver them to the speaker. That being said, we will try our best to stick to the schedule, and it means that each speaker or speakers will only have a 20-minute slot along with the Q&A section. So keep the presentations as brief as possible. So this is it for the technical information, which I'm sure you're not a novice to, because we've spent quite a lot of time in online conferences so far. And I believe that with this, we can open the conference. And to do so, I invite Anita Goldberga, the director of the Bibliography Institute of the National Library of Latvia, to give some opening words.
Good morning. There are guests and conference participants. Autumn terminology conferences at the National Library of Latvia have already become a tradition, which cannot be hindered for a long time, even by a global pandemic. Because fortunately, we can change the format of the conference. The previous conferences have touched on the theories and practices of terminology, historical and modern issues, and in 2019, the centenary of Latvian terminology was celebrated. The development of terminology is not only a matter of conscious cultivation of language policy, but also of cross-sectoral communication. Without terms, neither research, nor educational activities, nor the preservation of cultural heritage and the contextualization of knowledge is possible. That's why today's conference has a special topic related to communication and cooperation in the field of cultural heritage in the digital environment. Thank you to all the presenters from Estonia, Finland, Germany, Lithuania, and Latvia for your involvement. I wish all participants to take an active part by asking questions and participating in the final discussion. Best wishes for a successful conference. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anita. And I can only join in wishing everyone to be active, to get the ideas flowing, and make these few hours as valuable and useful as possible. That being said, I believe we can now move on to the actual presentations. And our first speaker for today is Renate Behrens from German National Library. Renate, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Elsa, and even Anita very much for the introduction and for welcoming us. When I saw, and I will greet all the colleagues from near and far from Germany here, from Frankfurt, and when I saw the film of your wonderful library, so many memories came up to me when I was there some years ago, and I hope to be there sometimes again. So I try to share my screen, and I hope it will work. Can you see the screen? Please give me a short feedback, then I will start with full presentation. And
yes, Renata, is everything okay?
Is it fine? Is it fine now?
No, before was fine.
Okay, then I will skip it again.
Yeah.
Is it now?
Yes.
Seems to be. Wonderful. Thank you. I just will jump in and try to be on time. I will talk about authority data as a link between cultural institutions. And what means this working between cultural institutions as an interdisciplinary work? What does interdisciplinary work mean? What is the linking tool between cultural institutions? About what resources are we talking about here? And what is needed for this, and how do we achieve access, or can we achieve access? These are many questions, and I do not always have an answer, so I'm keen to hear your voice. When we're talking about working with the cultural institutions, we are talking about many, many resources. You can see them here. It's going from music to performances, statues to furniture. And we are talking about resources in an analogous way, in a digital way, and even online. And many of our colleagues, and in our tradition, we call them special or particular or different. But you as well know practice in our libraries for the time being, and in our institutions. I think they are not special further on. So is there a linking tool between all these resources? I can say, or I think I can say, yes, these will be authority data, and authority data immediately turns us to vocabularies and terminology. We will come back to this later on. When we are talking about all these resources and standards, I think there we have a problem. The thinking here is not so far for all these types for resources. They are not efficient enough for this. And we are thinking in this context, much coming from books. So what is the current status? So far, each community has its own standards. Museums have their own archives, libraries, you know this very well. There has been first attempts to harmonize them all, but I think it's not sufficient for the time being. Nevertheless, and we all, especially in libraries, but even in museums and archives, we are all thinking in our own sections. Where are we going? We would like to have a cross-disciplinary cooperation, but the identity of the collections should be preserved. That's what I got back as a feedback so often, especially in museums. They say our collection is so special and we would keep this and we would show this speciality of our collection. Data should be interchangeable, at least in the core version. The focus, and this should not be forgot, the focus should be on the users, because for our users, it doesn't matter where a certain resource or an object is coming from. They just want to have an access to this. So what is needed for this? First of all, motivated partners. And this is a point I would like to underline, because very often it's forgotten when we are talking about cross-community work. We need a stable organizational structure. Without this, it will fail. That's my experience. We need, and this is an economic mean, we need sufficient resources, human resources, people who can work with us, and very basic, we need money to do this. And that's for us personally, you will need much of perseverance, high frustration tolerance, and a lot of patience. Who are suitable partners for this work? It's sure we need experts for many subjects. That is clear, no question about this. But we even need strategic decision makers, because if the decision makers, the directors of the institutions and so on, if they don't agree with our work, there will be an end very soon. That's basic, but it is. We need our users and we need to know what they want us to do. And this is a new aspect, I think, we need experts of social change and development. What mean this? You know, libraries, especially libraries, even museums have changed. We are talking about library as a living room and all these things, you know, which was developed and which is a very, very good approach in the last years. So we need people who have experience and expertise in this, on this topic and on this issue. We have to keep them on board. So what would we like to have? We would like to have an animal which is producing wool, meat, eggs, and everything. And all of you know this, when you start to have such a work or to make plans for project, many people are saying, this will never work, never, no way. And who want to have this? Who will pay for this? But perhaps we just can try it. I will give you an example for just trying. And this is a very practical approach. In the DACH, in the German-speaking region, we are active in cross-community work since 2014. We have currently 8 thematic groups, and we have experts in these working groups from libraries, archives, museums, and further institutions. And we have an overarching platform for all these working groups because it's so important that they come together and discuss their results. It looks like this. On top, we're having our committee on standards. We have at the left side in blue, our traditional expert groups for cataloging, data formers, and for our authority file. And we have here a bit highlighted in yellow, our expert groups on special resources. And I listed it up for you what issues we are treating with so far. And we have this overarching platform for all the working groups. These type, and you see since many years we are working in this way, leads to that the Committee for Library Standards, which was so far only concerned with libraries things, is in a huge process of opening to other cultural institutions. And since 3 years, we have deputies there from archives, deputies from museums will follow. What is common to these groups? The material types can be found in many different cultural facilities. And the existing regulations, what we are having, do not take these types of materials sufficiently into account. And there are many homemade solutions. Many colleagues from museums, small museums, they say, we're just trying to do something. Or even from huge libraries who have, for example, pictures, they are saying, we are cataloging with RDA, but for pictures, it's not efficient and it's not sufficient enough. So we have our homemade solution. We try a bit of RDA with graphic materials. And very often, especially smaller institutions, don't have any capacity for complicated indexing models. What separates these groups? They are in very different organizational structures. The range of topics is very diverse, very different composition of experts. Let us come to authority data. What is the role in this play? Authority data is the lowest common denominator for all working groups. This I would like to underline. That's my experience after more than 10 years working community with several communities. Authority data files most of them are established tools with a stable organization, and most authority data files have very extensive vocabularies, and the terminology in this place is approved and reliable. Give you the example from German-speaking countries, our integrated authority file. It is developed out of the library community, has been a working group on opening all these things, just giving you an example of what we did. And the GND will change over the next few years to accommodate the requirements that arise from cross-disciplinary work. who is involved in this opening? The Committee on Standards, as I showed you, which is already being expanded to include members from the archive sector, our special resources working groups, and this is new, we are just trying to organize this. We will have interest groups from archives, from museums, for buildings, for performing arts, to put in their expertise, because we cannot talk about interdisciplinary work and interdisciplinary terminology if we don't talk with themselves. So the picture will be much more colorful. You see on the right side our traditional, coming from library community, working groups and committees. And on the left side, these are these new interest groups. They will bring us their vocabularies, their terminology, and their ideas and their needs, and everything we try to bring it in our authority file. That's my last slide. What else is needed to work cross-disciplinary? Curious colleagues who are willing to leave their institutional shell and work with these colleagues from different communities. This is very basic, but it's essential, I think. And so I'm eager to hear your questions and your comments. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Yes, thank you, Renata, for the lovely presentation. And do we have some questions from the audience, or perhaps comments, not questions? If anyone has any questions, then please write them down in the chat. And while we're waiting, I have a question for you, actually. It's about the GND. Is it language dependent, or is it also used in, for example, Swiss, French, Italian-speaking institutions in their data sets?
Yes, that's a very important question. For the time being, it's only German-speaking, the GND. But as you mentioned, we have since the beginning, we have the Swiss colleagues with us. And so we had built up a special tool for them that they can switch, because, you know, in Switzerland, they have several official languages. And so they can switch in the GND to French, for example. And we are duplicating some of our working documents. But this is a very important issue we have to develop in the near future, much more.
So there are some plans to do so?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And first approaches.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not easy.
Yeah. If anyone has any more questions for Renata, then please feel free to leave them in chat, and I believe she will follow it up, and you can keep the discussion going there. But for now, we can move on to the next presenter.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. To the next presenter, who is Mikko Lappalainen from the National Library of Finland.
Hello everyone, and greetings from the National Library of Finland. My name is Mikko Lappalainen. I'm a development manager at the National Library of Finland in our Finto ontology service. My presentation is about linked open data as a bridge to a shared cultural heritage. I will focus on our Finnish experiences in adopting linked open data practices in libraries. The structure of the presentation is as follows. First, I will say a word or two about why linked data is something we should be doing in libraries. Then I will talk about our Finto ontology service, and then finish up with practical challenges and the benefits of developing linked data services in libraries. But let's start with this. Why should libraries care about linked data in general? Isn't linked open data for the semantic web and not for libraries? I think that this question should be turned into a form that why should libraries care about the web? I think that libraries should care about the web at large because libraries have a long tradition in information creation. And today's information is in the web. It is not just in the bookshelves and within the closed covers of the books. It's in the web, and it's part of the same large network of information that we have in the books. Of course, libraries are in the web, but are the libraries, are we for the web? Are we always following the standards and the rules of the web? Libraries have already a lot of resources and tools that could be useful to the web at large, and not just for libraries and other memory organizations. We have a long tradition in building thesauri and other vocabularies. We had a lot of structured data, for example, in our bibliographic catalogs, and we have a lot of know-how about organizing and creating information in general. And of course, this raises the question that should the commercial companies be the sole curators of the book, especially the public sector information about the web, or could perhaps the libraries act as neutral information curators in the web? Because companies like Google, of course, have their own commercial interests and so on. Okay, so moving on to the first part of this presentation, the so-called Finnish model. In early 2000s, there was this idea that we should actually build a network of ontologies and vocabularies that would connect all Finnish public sector information and make it findable according to the semantic web principles. And that libraries and other memory organizations would be the ones to tackle the problem of semantic interoperability of the public information in the web, and not the commercial companies. There was a project called FinOnto that started in 2003 and ran for almost 10 years, in which work was started in transforming library thesauri into machine-readable, linked open data indexing ontologies. And it was the key idea that we would use these ontologies to structure and link information about various domains in the web at large. I will try to visualize what I mean by this. These are examples of public services in Finland that are currently using the ontologies that were originally made in the FinOnto research project and currently developed at the Finto service at the National Library of Finland. The Ministry of Finance uses our ontologies to index their material. There's a webpage about AI and robots. There are Finto concepts used to index this piece of information. The museums in Finland are using our ontologies. They have objects about robots in their collections. The libraries are using the ontologies to index their materials like books. And services like the Suomi.fi, that is the Finland.fi, that provides information about public services to all citizens in Finland, are also using the ontologies we have in Finto to index their materials. So building a web of semantically interoperable information in the web at large is done using the same concepts within the linked ontologies that we use, that we develop in the Finto service. The results of the research project were integrated to the National Library of Finland in 2013 with the aim of deploying the tools and vocabularies for day-to-day use for the whole of Finnish public sector, not just libraries and museums, but also public administration organizations, for example. The new service was named Finto, the Finnish Thesaurus and Ontology Service, and it has been the permanent service at the National Library of Finland since 2019. Within Finto, we develop a network of multilingual indexing ontologies of various domains and technical tools for publishing ontologies and vocabularies as linked open data. In the heart of our ontology development lies the general Finnish ontology YSO that forms the basis and structure for the linked ontology system. And the YSO actually is based on an old library thesaurus called YSA that was originally developed in the National Library of Finland in the 80s. But it has been now transformed into a machine-readable form with a complete hierarchical structure. Multilingual terms have been added to the concepts. The YSO is linked to several Finnish domain ontologies and also to international sources like the Library of Congress subject headings and Wikidata. And persistent identifiers are used to identify each concept. And this ontology or vocabulary is published natively as linked open data and is not tied to a particular library format. As mentioned, there are several domain ontologies built to extend the general concept of the YSO. The YSO is developed here at the National Library of Finland, and the development of the domain ontologies is done in expert organizations. And we, the National Library of Finland, coordinate the infrastructure as a whole. The domain ontologies are linked to each other via the concepts of the YSO. And the YSO and the domain ontologies together form a large network of linked concepts and vocabularies that can be used as a separate vocabularies or together as a one large set of concepts. Here's a list of the YSO-based domain ontologies currently available from finto.fi. And as you can see, there are ontologies of several domains like natural resource and environment, public sector and administration, linguistics and literature, and so on. Okay, moving from the ontologies to our technical infrastructure, I will say a word or two about finto.fi service. That is a portal for the publication of linked open data ontologies and vocabularies in Finland. Through Finto, we provide a browsing interface and APIs for the use of the vocabularies. The finto.fi service is based on an open source Cosmos software that we develop at the National Library of Finland. And although we originally developed Cosmos for our own needs, since it's open source, it actually has currently quite a large active user community from around the world. Here's a screenshot of finto.fi and the general Finnish ontology there. And as you can see, it is used here to visualize, for example, the hierarchical structure of the YSO. You can see the multilingual labels here and the URI identifiers. And here are a few screenshots of Cosmos installations from around the world. There are several notable organizations like UNESCO and FAO that are using Cosmos currently. Okay, so we had built the linked open data ontologies and the finto.fi system. So what has changed when we have moved from the old MARC-based library system to the Finto system of linked open data? Most Finnish indexing vocabularies and ontologies are currently available from finto.fi as linked open data. Data is natively open to everyone, so it's not in library silos in library formats that are only understandable to libraries. We see the linked data formats as a sort of neutral ground for anyone to use, and as something that don't create silos in general. And of course, we provide the modern APIs so that the Finto vocabularies can be easily integrated to other systems. And since the launch of Finto service, there have been many integrations from public sector organizations from early on. Of course, since we developed Finto within the National Library of Finland, it was the plan from the get-go to get all the libraries in Finland to use the Finto ontologies as a part of their indexing and cataloging work. And we had the modern APIs, but when we started to look into the library systems in use in Finland, we actually found out pretty soon that many of the library systems are quite dated. They are quite closed and not very modular, so it's not easy to integrate other systems via the APIs to the library systems. And of course, many of the systems are based on the MONK 21 format that doesn't really support the sort of key components of the Finto ontologies like multilinguality, use of identifiers, and linked data formats. And when we actually found this out, it was a bit of a shock, and we knew that there would be a huge challenge in getting the Finto ontologies and vocabularies to use in libraries. But we did it, and here is how we did it. And I'm moving on now to the second part of this presentation about the challenges of adapting linked open data vocabularies in libraries, but also about the benefits of doing so. The first challenge was to transform the all old thesaurus indexing terms into a multilingual concept with URIs. And in the summer of 2019, we carried out a massive conversion to the Union Catalog of Finnish libraries, transforming all the old thesaurus indexing terms into multilingual Finto concepts. And here's an example of our Union Catalog record. And here you can see what we have done with the indexing terms of this record. So for each one concept in Finto, we had to make several 650 fields so that we could get the multilingual labels into the record. And of course, you can see that we use here the subfield to denote not just the name of the vocabulary, but also language of the term in this particular field. So in this case, we wanted to add the terms into the records in Finnish and in Swedish. We had to sort of double each field within the MONK record so that we could get the indexing terms multilingual. And you can see the URI, of course, is the same with these two fields because it's actually the same concept. And this is, of course, had to be done with all the concepts within the record. And the URIs were recorded in the subfield 0 of the 650 field in the MONK bibliographic record. Okay, so the second challenge was to transform the linked open data concepts of Finto into MONK 21 authority records because we couldn't use the Finto APIs because the library systems weren't able to use the API. So we had to get the Finto concepts transformed into MONK 21 authority records so that the indexers and catalogers in libraries could use Finto concepts. And this meant that although we had a one concept in Finto in the YSO vocabulary that was multilingual, we had to make 3 records in MONK 21, one for each language version, and then these records had to be linked together. So quite a bit of work, extra work for us, and all because of the limitations of the MONK 21 record. So the lessons learned from the conversion project using linked open data vocabularies in current library systems in Finland, at least. I know that there are some more modern systems in use elsewhere that require some creativeness, and it might require also programming of some additional pieces of software. And the end result is not the prettiest Mark 21 records, but they work as intended. But still it's doable and probably worth it. And now we are moving on to the benefits of using the linked open data vocabularies in libraries. In the past, when we wanted to make a multilingual indexing to a library record, we had to do it once using a Finnish vocabulary, and then again using a vocabulary in other languages. So trying to get a indexing terms in 2 languages required double the work in the past. These are terms in Finnish and Swedish, and they are from different vocabularies, although the concepts sort of behind these terms are the same. So it requires a double work. But now this is no longer needed because we can use the URI of the Finso concepts, and the URI can be used then to fetch the rest of the information of the concept from Finso. So the indexer can do the work using any of the supported languages of the vocabulary, and then you can automatically add the terms in other languages after the indexing work. And also moving on to the sort of key arguments of this presentation about using linked data as a sort of bridge to sort of get the library materials as part of the sort of bigger network of information in the web at large. Now that we use Finso linked concepts to index the materials in libraries, here's a screenshot from our Finna search interface and a book about renovating your house. We could actually provide the person using the Finna interface to provide information about same subject, for example, from Wikipedia, because we have linked YSO to Wikidata. We could link the information to the City of Helsinki pages where there is information about what permits do you need when doing renovation. And of course, since we have links to international sources, we could provide information from international databases also if we wanted. So through the linked vocabularies, we are more and more coming sort of part of the web of information at large. So summing up the key challenges when adopting linked open data in libraries. The used systems can set certain barriers, and the used formats, and I'm talking especially about the Mark 21 formats, do set certain barriers. I'm hoping that BibFrame and the more advanced formats will bring a change to this matter. And adopting a new way of thinking about library work can take some time. But it can make cataloging indexing easier, especially about the multilinguality part, and more meaningful. And with the linked data, libraries can adopt a new role in the web of information. And through linked data, libraries can find new partners and increase their influence. And of course, I'm hoping, and I think that many are sharing this hope with me, that hopefully in the future, library systems will be developing towards the linked open data world, in which we can see the benefits of linked data realizing in a much bigger way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikko. And we have a question for you from in the audience behind the screen. It's about whether you encountered some problems with the term semantics in the process of ontologization of old library vocabularies, and if so, how did you solve it?
Obviously, it wasn't an easy task to transform the old library thesaurus to ontologies, and especially when we wanted to make the new ontologies multilingual, we had to struggle quite a bit to get the terms to match the languages, and also building the sort of complete hierarchical structure to the YSO that has currently 30,000 concepts. It was quite a bit of work. So it was challenging, but now that it's done, I think that we can enjoy the benefits of using the YSO.
Okay, thank you for that. And there's also a question from the chat, which goes, may I ask about the Finnish language library terminology? Where can I find this?
About the library terminology in Finnish.
Yes.
We have library terminology within some of the vocabularies that we have currently in finso.fi, so you can just search all the vocabularies there. But also we are currently working on translating the ISO 5127 vocabulary into the Finnish language, and I know that within that vocabulary there are quite a bit of terminology about libraries and archives and museums and so on, and it will be hopefully published next year in Finso.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. So this is it for the moment for questions for you, but probably there might be still more questions in the chat. And we can move on to the next presentation, which is by my colleague, Edvards Skvireckis from the National Library of Latvia. Edvards, please.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
No. Okay, just a sec. And now?
All good.
Yes.
Good to go.
All right. Hi. In the 2020, the National Library of Latvia, in cooperation with the University of Latvia, has launched a project, Latvian Memory Institution Data in the Digital Space, Connecting Cultural Heritage, under the program of Fundamental and Applied Research implemented by the Latvian Council of Science. The aim of the project is to study and describe semantic cooperation potential of cultural heritage institutions in Latvia and test particular models of knowledge organization. The purpose behind this objective is to make heterogeneous data interoperable in the digital space using structured and verified vocabularies and data sets. In order to do so, we created and published conceptual data model for cultural heritage institutions in Latvia that would function as theoretical basis for the ATS, that is Reference Data Module, a small part from digital object management and conservation platform that is developed in the National Library of Latvia. The document is called Conception for the Reference Data Model of Latvian Cultural Heritage Institutions that was published in this year, July. But what is ATS, that is Reference Data Module, actually? At first, I must say that it doesn't exist yet. It is still in production phase, and right now we are going through several data migration related problems and processes. But in general, ATS is planned as something quite similar to Finnish ontology service Finto that was mentioned just before, a centralized platform for interoperable thesauri, ontologies and classification schemes for different subject areas from all participating cultural heritage institutions in Latvia. But today I will talk only about conceptual data model of ATS and problems of general terminology that we stumbled upon. That is, what is status of ATS, how to define it, how exactly to call it, what is underneath the ATS hood, and what are the components of ATS. On the screen, you can see all the different versions of what ATS is, what it should be or could be. And in this presentation, I will try to go through all of these terms. And I will start with the ontology. The compound word ontology combines onto from the Greek on, that is a present participle of the verb eimi, that is to be, and ontos meaning being or that which is, and logia, which is a logical discourse. So something about being. As you may know, there are two major use cases of the concept ontology in the philosophy and information science. What ontologies in both information science and philosophy have in common is the attempt to represent entities, ideas, and events with all their interdependent properties and relations according to a system of categories. Some researchers drawing inspiration from philosophical ontologies viewed computational, that is information science ontology, as a kind of applied philosophy. So here you can see two definitions of ontology in the information science. One is from 1993, and that is as following. An ontology is a description, like a formal specification of program of the concepts and relationships that can formally exist for an agent or community of agents. This definition is consistent with the usage of ontology as set of concept definitions, but more general. And it is a different sense of a word that it is used in philosophy. And later on, Weilmeyer and Voss refined Gruber's definition and said that an ontology is formal, explicit specification of shared conceptualization that is characterized by high semantic expressiveness required for increased complexity. There are two basic types of ontologies in the computer science, domain-specific and upper ontologies, but we will not go into the details. Domain-specific ontologies are those that represent concepts which belongs to a realm of the world, like biology, philosophy, and so on. And upper ontologies mostly consist of very general terms, such as object, property, relations, and something like that. But I will not delve into the details. As a basis for the conceptual data model in National Library of Latvia, we chose to use CDOC CRM core upper ontology combined with the CDOC CRM domain-specific, that is cultural heritage ontology. And again, ATS schema is based on these CDOC CRM ontologies as an expansion to them. The CDOC CRM is a formal ontology, and as such, it constitutes a controlled language for talking about the particulars. That is, it provides classes and properties for categorizing particulars as so-called instances, in a way that their individuation, unity, and relevant properties are ambiguous as possible. For instance, Tutankhamun as an instance of A21 person, as you can see on the left side in the red, is a real pharaoh, is a real person from his birth to death, and not extending to his mummy, as follows from the specification of the class of person as its properties in the CDOC CRM states. So all these classes are very specific to the domain they are used in. Okay, but what means a controlled language that all the ontologies uses? Ontology languages are formal languages used to construct ontologies. They allow the encoding of knowledge about specific domains and often include reasoning rules, and that is very important to support the processing of that knowledge. Reasoning rules means that there are, in the language, there are some basic rules, mostly that is the first order logic or something like that, that is common to everyone. And you can't go like a person can live after he's died or something like that. These concepts are disseminated in these ontology languages. And there are several kinds of languages, but I will talk only about a few of them, and specifically about markup ontology languages that we will be using in the ATS. And that is RDF, RDFS, and OL. These languages use a markup scheme to encode knowledge, and most commonly with XML. They are XML compatible. So RDF provides a generic abstract data model for describing resources using subject, predicate, object triples, as you may know. And you can see in the bottom on the slide that RDF schema, just the subject, predicate, and object. However, it does not provide any domain-specific terms for describing classes of things in the world and how they relate to each other. This function is served by taxonomies, vocabularies, and ontologies expressed in the RDFS or OL or in SCOS, as a matter of fact. RDFS and OL provide the vocabularies for describing conceptual models in terms of classes and their properties. For example, someone may define an RDFS vocabulary about pets that includes a class dog, of which all individual dogs are members. They may also define a property has color, thereby allowing people to publish RDF descriptions of their dogs using this ontology terms. Here in the picture, you can see a small ontology where there is defined a university, person, student, and you can see all the classes and subclasses and the relations between them. And above there's a schema, and below there is an instance that means the schema is fulfilled with some content. RDFS and OL are used in the cases where subsumption relationships, that is inheritance between terms, should be represented. RDFS is a language for describing lightweight ontologies with RDF. CRM model, as well as the ATS, are defined in terms of an object-oriented metamodel. It is an abstract logical expression of the concepts and relationships or classes and properties which are relevant to cultural heritage documentation. In its native form, it can be used to analyze and compare different standards and systems. RDF is currently the knowledge encoding paradigm closest to the CRM and the most widely spread. Therefore, for each official release of the CRM, the RDF schema expression of the CRM is published as an official resource on the CRM website. And ATS, as compatible as an expansion of CRM, of course, will be we will be able to express it in RDF as well. This CRM is an ontology in the proper sense. Therefore, instances of physical things and phenomena of the physical worlds are regarded to be things themselves and not their machine representations. And any identifier or name used for something for the material world is different from the thing itself. For instance, I, Edward Skvoreskis, am instance of E21 person. That is one of the CRM entities. And not any of the URIs or records that may represent me in an information system. I am unique in this world, as is any particular thing, in contrast to representations of me. In the CRM, the property P1 is identified by reaches from E1, that is CRM entity, like a person, to E41 appellation or E42 identifier. And that relates the thing to their names or identifiers. This simple relation that P1 is identified by. For example, Tutankhamun that I mentioned before, the name, the instance of E41 is different from Tutankhamun the person, the instance of E21 person, and also different from the relationship between name and person, that is P1 is identified by. Instances of CDOC-CRM classes are the real particulars, not their names, but in descriptions, names must be used in the surrogates for the real things meant. Particulars are approximate individuations, like sections of parts of reality. Here you can see a person, entity, class in relation to other data elements from ontology and data model, that is ATS ontology. I must note one more thing. CDOC-CRM is formulated as a class system with inheritance, as I mentioned before in the ontology languages. Inheritance of properties from superclasses to subclasses means that if an item X is an instance of a class A, then all properties that must hold for the instances of any of superclass of A must hold for the item X. That means item X as a subclass inherits all the properties and classes, superclasses from the superclass. So ATS, in addition to being a specific module or functional block in the bigger system, also ticks the ontology checkbox. And that was quite a long explanatory and long notes about ontology, but I thought that it must be done because there's a lot of confusion about what ontology is and what it isn't. So the next one is vocabulary. Is ATS also a vocabulary? Yes and no. On the semantic web, vocabularies define the concepts and relationships used to describe and represent an area of concern. Vocabularies are used to classify the terms that can be used in particular application, characterize possible relationships, and define possible constraints on using those terms. In practice, vocabularies can be very complex or very simple. But as you may grasp, the vocabularies in the meaning of semantic web in this field is quite similar to ontology. And actually, a lot of times the trend is to use the word ontology for more complex and possibly quite formal collections of terms, whereas vocabulary is used when such strict formalism is not necessarily used or only in a very loose sense. So yes, in the context of semantic web, there is no clear division between what is referred to as vocabulary and ontology, but that's not the case in the library context. Here you can see something different. Here is a screenshot from our term database, where definition of vocabulary reads vocabulary that includes appellations and definitions of concepts from one or more specialization fields. From this, we can clearly see that understanding of term vocabulary in semantic web and library fields are quite different. ATS as a whole, in this sense, is more like a vocabulary in the context of semantic web, although it includes several vocabularies in the sense of library context as extensions. So I think we can check the vocabulary box and move on to controlled vocabularies. A controlled vocabulary is an organized arrangement of words and phrases used in the index content to index content and or to retrieve content through browsing or searching. It typically includes preferred and variant terms and has a defined scope and describes a specific domain. The most important function of controlled vocabulary are to gather variant terms and synonyms for concepts and to link concepts in the logical order or sort them into categories. I must note that the types of vocabularies, controlled vocabularies, I must say, described below are not always mutually exclusive. For example, a single vocabulary can be both a thesaurus and an authority file, and etc. Subject headings as one of type of controlled vocabularies are uniform words or phrases intended to be assigned to books, articles, or other documents in order to describe subject or topic of the texts and to group them with texts having similar subjects. National Library of Latvia subject headings have been developed and maintained since 2000 as a fundamental and universal vocabulary that forms the basis of the National Thesaurus of Latvia. National Library of Latvia subject headings contains topical headings, geographic names, and form genre terms. And it is used not only in the Union Catalog, but also in the several digital collections. A National Library of Latvia subject heading authority data that forms the basis of the National Thesaurus of Latvia has been transformed into SCOS and published as linked data. The datasets are published using SCOSMOS, a web-based tool for browsing and publishing SCOS data that was mentioned in the previous presentation as well. According to the SCOSMOS installation instructions, RDF data is loaded into a Fuseki RDF store, and the resulting SCOSMOS concept pages are published on the web. The NLL linked authority data consists of 3 datasets: topical terms, geographic names, and form genre terms. These linked authority datasets can be used for interlinking cultural heritage information, for example, by referring to the concepts not just from library information systems, but also from the other memory institutions such as archive and museum data. And we have included NLLSH as in ATS as well. And next one, authority file. Authority file is a set of established names or headings and cross-references to the preferred form from variant or alternative forms. Common types of authority files are name authority files and subject heading authority files. So I will not speak about authority files anymore, because I assume anyone knows them very well by heart. So, but I must mention that in the National Library of Latvia, we are holding around 2,050 authority records that includes persons, institutions, unified titles, works, and so on. The next controlled vocabulary type is alphanumeric classification schemes that are controlled codes that represent concepts or headings. They generally have an implied taxonomy that can be surmised from the codes. The UDC, Universal Decimal Classification System, is an example of a numeric classification scheme that with which many people are familiar, and it is used in National Library of Latvia as well, and it is planned to somehow implement it into the ATS. The next one is thesauri, and thesauri is a bit different and a bit difficult to explain. It somehow intertwines with all other controlled vocabularies, especially in the usage of the term. But in general, a thesaurus is a semantic network of unique concepts, including relationships between synonyms, broader and narrower terms. And we have, as I mentioned, our subject headings, National Library of Latvia subject headings are something quite similar and used as synonym to thesauri. Okay, sorry. So I think we can check all these checkboxes of all types of controlled vocabularies as they are or will be used as parts of ATS. So we are left with the reference data and entity registry. Reference data is the data used to classify or categorize other data. Typically, they are static or slowly changing over time. And here you can see a small list of reference data that we will be using in the ATS. And that is codes for representation of names of languages and codes for representation of names of countries and their subdivisions, classifier for places, ESCO, and etc. And about a metadata registry that is a central location in an organization where metadata definitions are stored or maintained as a controlled method. Although I'm not competent in this area, it seems quite self-explanatory that ATS will be some kind of metadata registry. Although there's some talks about entity registry, that ATS is entity registry, that I'm not sure about how it fits here. And here we are. As we can see, all the checkboxes are ticked. There are no right answer to the question I asked you in the beginning of presentation. What exactly is ATS and what it stands for? All answers are right in the some way and wrong in the other. But still, we need to be careful and distinguish between all these different terms and how they relate to ATS and to each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edwards. It was a very informative presentation. Hopefully other listeners also found it useful. But could you maybe tell more about the process of development of the conception? Did you and your institutional partners from other organizations always saw eye to eye with regards to what terms to include in the conception, or maybe there were some debate or misconceptions, misunderstandings? If so, how did you solve the matter?
Thank you for your question. Actually, yes, all my presentation is about misunderstandings, some kind of misunderstandings, because there are a lot of versions about ATS, what it is meant to do, actually, and how we understand it. And then when we came together, all these museums, colleagues from museums, archives, and libraries, and we talked about it. And I read some documents that was written and published before I started to work here. I understood that there is lots of confusion about how we relate our concepts to the terms we are using. And there is actually a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of misconceptions about, yes, what is ATS like? There are a lot of people calling it thesaurus, that ATS is thesaurus, but as you can see, ATS is far from the thesaurus, or far from the simple vocabulary. It is it's a data model, it is ontology, it is all of the things that I mentioned, all these terms. But I wanted to remind everyone with this presentation and further on that we must be careful when we are using these terms, and we must completely and perfectly well understand what we are meaning by them when we are using them, especially in the documents.
Yeah,
but
right
now, yeah, I'm hoping that we are getting a clearer and clearer picture about terminology relating to ATS and this knowledge base that we are building.
Yeah, I'm sure as the actual product gets developed, some more improvements and clarifications are to come. Yeah, but thank you. And with this, we can move on to our next presenter, which is Violeta Černiauskaite from Martynas Mažvydas National Library of Lithuania. Violeta, the stage is yours.
I'd like to begin from some statistics from the National Library of Lithuania, because I like to show more widely content of our digitization. As you see marked in red, we have big increasings from 2019 to 2020. And so our terminology work is and the content we are all very busy with our works. And it is quite clear that one of the most important factors influencing and changing library terminology is the need and speed of digitization processes. Martynas Mažvydas, National Library of Lithuania, is one of the main digitization management authorities. And other memory institutions at national, regional, or sectoral level participates also in this activity. But from the terminology point of view, we are the leaders in almost all areas of digitization terminology. From the national digital policy, as you see on the slide, and for the other documentation, for example, guides, manuals for new system and technology implementations, translations of international standards and recommendations, special terminology, vocabularies, dictionaries, useful terms, and of course, the Union Terminology Database, which is managed at our National Library. Digitization processes at public administration and business institution system, as you see on the slide, have a common space in digital economy. And we are connected in one or another way with very different approaches to data sets arrangement and of terminology also. And of course, we look for new partners that we have created a terminology commission, cooperate not only with libraries, museum, as you see, archives experts, but with the Center of Terminology and the Institute of the Lithuanian Language, Vilnius University Specialist, State Commission of the Lithuanian Language, and other institutions. As you see, we have a lot of systems. You see only the main portals of digitized cultural heritage in Lithuania. This is a heritage, virtual digital cultural heritage information system. The other big portal is Lithuanian Integral Museum Information System. The other system, as you see, managed at our library is Lithuanian Integral Information System of Libraries. Also, a very big system is Electronic Archive Information System and Media Library. Also, we have a special portal for cultural heritage digitization, e-culture for libraries, museums, archives, and other cultural heritage institutions. This is the main information portal, as you see. The modernization of virtual information system for digital cultural heritage story managing and publishing a heritage performed this year with updating all terminological data. Terminological data was a necessary part of knowing how to create descriptions using widely shared metadata standards, vocabularies, and elements commonly needed for digital collections. As you see, this is an example of new terminology which we have done for methodology for cultural heritage selection and digitalization prepared and published by National Library at 2019. With recommendations, rules, and metadata models to cultural heritage objects description and access are made for Lithuania's information system of the virtual electronic heritage through Portal F heritage, as well as possibilities to represent our digital objects as a data model for Europeana. This means that our terminology activity currently serves to combine different data element sets and Europeana data model. There is no single, of course, data set or standard of metadata elements that is suitable for all digital cultural heritage collections and could be used in all digitization projects. But using in practice a method of application profiles, sometimes we have real terminology challenges, but for this reason, also for the other reasons, we can still with beginnings as a dark digital age. In order to open our heritage as widely as possible to users, metadata system must be clearly understood as minimum bilingual in English and native languages. So as you see, more than 100 cultural institutions in Lithuania contributes to Europeana collections. And now we have 68% of visits from Lithuania Groves collections in Lithuanian and 36% in English. The most important part of our work, of course, connected with translations. We have a lot of new terms, abbreviations, science examples, and other difficulties with language translations. And as a one or two specialists is enough for that, of course. But some extension of our digital heritage system with original metadata controlled vocabularies are very important to show our collections worldwide. Of course, we have suggested ontology-based extension with special vocabularies of Lithuanian historical places, personal names, and historical chronology used in our memory institutions. And this makes Lithuanian cultural heritage semantic enrichments as well, maybe, as the Europeana data model with its semantic enrichment. Here you can see some publishing important bibliography to more detailed research publication in English available on this topic. Other most important topic for the digitization terminology connected with content access rights terminology. We have only 27% openly licensing objects in Europeana collections provided by Lithuania and 70% with public domain mark. So I must pay your attention to the new methodology and guidance on the assignment and labeling of rights of use of digitized and digital cultural heritage. It was also developed at the National Library together with digital content labeling manual and tool. And this electronic tool is designed to identify label works related to subject matter or non-protected subject matter under the International Creative Commons licenses. The different kind of materials we need for librarians in more detailed, complex, and legal terminology, other we can see for users in ordinary user-friendly language. But otherwise, we must notice how much change our terminology data. It has long been not only text data, but also signs, members, symbols, graphics, as you can see. Every day, terminology updating is connected with modernization of professional information systems. Such big updates requires enormous and fast terminology work, as we had with the Library Integrated Information System this year. From the one hand, the terminology data are important for extension of the new electronic services important for users. And we must understand this. But from the other hand, librarians most of all needs this year the manual for the records description and access to the system, as you see the example of our latest manual. As we look at the last updatings of Lithuanian Integrated Library Information System, a library, we must understand that the importance of our terminology work must increase, not only because of the scientific or cultural, but also for the economic value of this work generates. Updatings of our professional terminology is visible at the Martynas Mažvydas library website. This is Terminologijos darbai, terminology work, where we can find information on our, for librarians, devoted for librarians, of our evaluation and approval of terms, short summary on terminography, standardization, annotated list of Lithuanian, bilingual and multilingual special dictionaries and encyclopedias, also register of special publication in this field, other useful links to sources and database in Lithuania and abroad. And here you can see our newest product, bilingual Lithuanian English Dictionary of Librarianship, Information and Book Science with 10,000 terms entry in alphabetic order. I hope it would be accessible online this year. And we can look at this dictionary only as a union catalog for the most commonly used terms. This is important today for the library community and for the library users. You can see the first part, the Lithuanian English dictionary, and the other part, Registry of English Lithuanian Dictionary. Special terminology, of course, plays important role to the introduction of the new technologies for librarians. But of course, transforming special language into user-friendly language is no less important. We are looking for the effective ways to represent our new terms, our new solutions to the other publicity. So this is the example how we can use our dictionary reused in way which we need for library users or for the other community. Of course, we have one more special topic on the professional journal Terminological. This is the special. This is our publications with discussions about our professional terminology, and of course, selective publication list as registry of bibliography from 2012 of our terminology articles and related publication in this field is available from the website Terminology Works also. Yes, we work in multilingual environments with most closed connections to the language information. So we talk today less about native language and other our work, which we work for language normalization, for language harmonization. But through the terminological activities, we can manage quality changes not only to our collection digital, but to our language also. And at the end, I'd like to show the best practice. I think from our library, we have a very popular club for language discussion that has been running for several years, moderated by Jolanta Zabarskaitė. So this is introduction to the community, very important for us too. We wish everyone success in creative terminology work, because in many cases we work as translators, as communicators, as educators, and in other roles. But we need more cooperative actors in future, because better terminology for digital collections, as you know, only begins. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Violetta, for that. And we have a question from an audience member of what kind of vocabularies are used in the knowledge-based subsystem for metadata description in Lithuanian language, if there are any more used besides ISO 5217.
Yes, we look at thank you. We look at our dictionaries, of course, as a universal tool for librarian community, because librarian community has a lot of publications, manuals, guide recommendations, standards, data sets, model, and so on and so on. So we try to prepare for librarians one common set of course, we administrated database library for librarianship terminology, but there are information about technologies, about publishing, about other systems which we work, also some terms from museums, and so this is the common and most convenient library terms. May be reused not only for our community, for our librarians from our library, but for the more widely for the other communities. I think this is very important, because the models, special models for data sets, for data sets, for many other purposes, we have very special terminology resources. But the most common tools to understand changes in our libraries are important too. And we must this big need-based to develop, I think.
It absolutely is, yeah.
Hear something more.
Okay, thank you, Violeta. There are at the moment no more questions for you, but I can remind everyone to write them down in the chat if you think of something.
I'll try to look.
Yeah, please do. It applies to all the speakers. And for now, I invite everyone to take a quick lunch break, to replenish your energy, to stretch out your legs, and we'll see you back in half an hour. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully everyone's at least on their way back to our conference. And I hope you all had a lovely break and are getting cozy for the second and last segment of our conference for today. Let's install and keep on moving with our presentations. And our next presenters are Baiba Holma and Daina Pakalna from University of Latvia.
Hello. So I think it's possible to see. Yes.
Yes, it's okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Together with my colleague Daina Pakalna, we did a small study about provision of terminology for this topic, interoperability of knowledge organization systems in the semantic web. And now I'm going to share with results. So first of all, I will shortly describe the importance of the topic, then the aim of the study and the methodology which we used, and then about results and some conclusions. So to describe the importance of the topic, I would like to start with this visualization where we can see all these three main concepts from the title, which are knowledge organization systems, semantic web, and the interoperability. And just to stress once more what we have heard before in previous presentations of colleagues, I just want to remind that the idea about semantic web is almost 20 years old, from 2001, when Tim Berners-Lee firstly described the idea of what semantic web would be. And then we see that from 2009, when was developed a simple knowledge organization system framework and also resource description framework, we can say that it was possible to start to think about transformation of traditional knowledge organization systems which were used in library field for a long time. We can start to think about how to transform these knowledge organization systems in a digital environment and to prepare them or to describe them in a way that machines or computers can read them and use it as a tool for improvement of information retrieval and information searching. So the aim of our study, therefore, was to understand and to assess how much of the terms which were important in the development of the field of information and knowledge organization in the context of digital environment according to semantic web requirements, how much of these terms are accessible in Latvian language. And we saw that this is important both for practical solutions and for practical tasks, and also for development of research, especially if we look for if you look from the university side, our students, when they are trying to investigate some topics, when they need also to write their papers, and it's important that they can use the terms in Latvian language. So it's important also to develop the terminology of a field in native language. So the methodology which we decided to use was the following. We tried to find the latest articles published about this topic. We used for searching in Primo, we use keywords knowledge organization systems, interoperability, and semantic web. And you can see in this slide a little screenshot from this. So there is main parameters which we used for article selection. And when we selected 27 articles, and we understood that we are going to assess, or we are going to use as our empirical base, we are going to use keywords which were assigned to the articles by the authors. And the reason was that we understand that authors usually, as a keyword, selects most important words. Therefore, we wanted to use these keywords as a base for our empirical research. So there is a cloud of these keywords which we selected from these articles. And you can see that these keywords which are mentioned more are in a bigger size. So knowledge organization, metadata, linked data, ontology, semantic web, knowledge management, digital libraries, and so on, were the most frequently used keywords. Altogether, it was 124 keywords from these 27 articles, but we selected from these 124 keywords, 42 keywords, which we assess as more appropriate for the field of information and knowledge organization. And when we grouped these keywords into 10 sets of terms, I will show you a little bit later these sets of terms. And when we try to analyze these keywords from the terminological aspect, and for the assessment of these keywords and for finding them relevant or corresponding terms, we used the three terminology databases. One was National Portal of Terminology, which should be the most official source for terminology. So the next one was a database of libraries, archives, and museums. And the third database was the Tilde terminology. So in this slide, you can see the main concepts around which we made these concept sets. So it's a knowledge information, then it's a linked data, semantics, metadata, thesaurus, ontologies, interoperability concepts, and then these other or separate terms. And this is the picture where you can see how we grouped these selected keywords around these concepts, but this you can see also later in my presentation as well. And just for example, this is a screenshot from the National Portal of Terminology. So it's information about term knowledge management, you can see. Then the second is database of libraries, archives, and museums terms. And the third one is still the terminology. So you can see that in this database where is possible to do both linguistic search and also semantic search, which of course is more relevant or more important sometimes. So yeah, and just some more notes from this methodological part. So we try to find this corresponding analog in Latvian language when we also look for status of a term. Is it an approved term or not approved term? And if it's approved term, when in which terminological subcommission it is approved, and also if there is a date of approval, because sometimes it's very important to see which is the latest approval data and which subcommission approved this data. And looking at these keywords terms from terminological aspects, we also look at such issues as there is a term which belongs to Latvian literary language, or it is a international term or internationalism, or maybe this is a neologism. So about results, and I'm going to analyze these results based on this set of terms. As I mentioned before, there is a 10 set of terms, and first set of terms were around the concept knowledge. These terms were mentioned as a keywords in these articles 12 times. And so we see that around concept knowledge, there was such keywords as knowledge representation, knowledge organization, knowledge modeling, knowledge organization systems, simple knowledge organization systems, knowledge organization, I'm sorry, it's the second time, and also knowledge graphs. And when we search this information about every keyword or every term, we put this data in the table, and you see that in this table there is in the second column, you can see how many times this concept was used as a keyword in these articles. And in the next columns, it's possible to see if there is a term in Latvian, if there is a corresponding term in Latvian. When next column shows if it's a Latvian or international term, then if there is an accessible definition for this term, when the database is in which the term is found, and also the status, and also if there is a subcommission which approved this term. And if we see from these all terms, which is grouped around the concept knowledge, then we can see that only for two of them, knowledge management and knowledge representation, we found that there is a corresponding Latvian term. These both terms are also belongs to Latvian literary language, and these both terms also have definitions. So only from all these, we can find only these two terms. The next set of terms were made around concept information, and you see there are also enough or many such terms which belongs to this concept information. There is information representation, information retrieval, information visualization, information modeling, information storage and retrieval systems, information discovery, information seeking, and information accessibility. So again, we found only for two for two concepts or terms, we found only relevant or corresponding Latvian term. It was for the first information retrieval. There is a term in Latvian. It's a term which is made in Latvian language. And so we can see that there is also possible to find definition for this term, and also in which databases this term we can find, and also this is a approved term in subcommission. And the second from this group is information storage and retrieval systems. So it's also term with term in Latvian, but there is no definition. But we find it in a tilde terminology. So it's not yet also approved as a term. But all other concepts or terms, there is no relevant term in Latvian language. So, yeah, and what I also want to specially mention that for information retrieval, we can see that there are several terms, and these are three terms, and these all three are a little bit different terms in Latvian. So they are not the same term in Latvian for this concept, English term information retrieval. And that's mean that if you choose this term for your paper, then you need to understand which is the correct term. So the next set of terms is around the concept linked data, and there is two more terms, linked open data and linked representations. And again, if we try to find in databases of terminology, when we see that there is a term for linked data and linked open data in tilde terminology, but we didn't find this term as approved term. But of course, this is one of the terms which are very often used in both in conversation and also in many publications. And also with linked data, it also has different terms in Latvian. So it's also important to take into consideration what kind of context it is for example, in the article, and which one of these terms it's necessary to use. The next set of terms is around concept semantics. Semantics, of course, is a term which belongs to many disciplines, but according to this topic, of course, more important is all what is connected with semantic web, and also some other derived terms like deep semantic annotation and the semantic structures and so on. But we find that there are terms for semantic web in Latvian language. So it is both in Latvian and also like international word, and we find it in tilde terminology. Next set of terms is around the concept metadata. So it's also very often used term, and we see that in these articles, the authors used also such keywords like metadata crosswalk and library metadata and learning object metadata. And from all these terms, we find only term in Latvian for the concept metadata, and it was possible to find this corresponding Latvian term in all three terminological databases, and it is also approved term in Latvian. And then about thesaurus, the authors in their publications or in their articles, they used such terms as thesaurus tools and thesaurus integrity and thesaurus construction and thesaurus query expansion, but we didn't find any of terms in Latvian. So maybe they are not so important in Latvian, but that's mean that we just have not any terms which corresponds in Latvian language. But of course, we find this basic term thesaurus, and also we can see that thesaurus in Latvian language is used in two ways, with this long E and also with short E. Thesaurs and thesaurs. And ontologies, yeah, it's also a very frequently used term in communication about these topics, and we didn't find this term in any of these three databases. So, but we find interoperability and semantic interoperability as a term in Latvian databases of terminology, and also if we look at the terms which were assigned to the concept, when we find only one corresponding term for the term conceptual reference model, but not for concept schemes and not also for concept specialization. So, and then the other terms, controlled languages, controlled vocabularies, graphs and networks, taxonomy and web of data. So from these terms, three had corresponding Latvian terminology. It is from for controlled vocabularies. We see that we can find corresponding terms in all three databases, as well as for taxonomy and as well as for web of data. So the main conclusions from all our study, first of all, we once more can repeat that this is a field which is very important to know, because it's very fast developing, and knowledge organization systems is important semantic tools, or we can say they are also semantic data models which can be used in semantic web. And as I mentioned also before, the developments in a transformation of traditional knowledge organization systems to the digital world started from 2009. So it's more than 10 years ago. And of course, there are several projects and research projects and also real practical solutions which done in this field, and that's mean that it would be very important to have relevant terms in Latvian to describe all these concepts, and also of course to help to develop also this field in the context of knowledge of it. And if we look at these analyzed keywords and corresponding terms in Latvian, then we can conclude that there is a vast majority of all terms and concepts could be considered as interdisciplinary terms, especially they are mostly connected with terms from information and communication technology field. And but of course there are also much work is done in terminology of library and information science, but we believe in this field it would be nice to add add more terms, especially those who are frequently used with knowledge organization and information organization, like for example, knowledge modeling and knowledge graphs and knowledge organization systems. And from this group around the concept information, it would be very good if there will be term for information representation, information visualization, information modeling, information discovery, information accessibility, and so on. So thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I would be happy to answer, or maybe later.
Thank you, Baiba, and also Diana, of course, for your presentation and information. We have a question from the audience. Based on your studies, how would you describe the state of Latvian terminology in terms of concepts and ideas such as semantic web tools, knowledge organization systems, data interoperability? Is there sufficient data terms to describe these things?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. We saw that from these 42 keywords which we analyzed, that there was only 35% of them with corresponding terms in Latvian. In some cases, of course, maybe it's not important to have for all these keywords also relevant terms in Latvian language, but in many cases it is very necessary to use the same term in Latvian for the same concept. So yeah, we believe that it's very important to improve the situation and to develop more terms for this field in Latvian language.
Of course, we'll see. With following initiatives to practically apply these things, we'll probably see more of them translated. Okay, thank you, Baiba. And we can continue with Nijole Bliģuviene from Vilnius University.
Hello, everyone. I'd like, first of all, to thank the organizers of this meeting for inviting me here today, and let me thank you all for coming. In my topic, I will share with you some insights into standardization as human activity, entities of standardization activities of memory institutions as a form of their integration. National Technical Committee, LSTTC 47, Information and Documentation Evaluation, and its mandated expert purpose will be discussed. The main terminology standard for information and documentation, ISO Information and Documentation Foundation and Vocabulary, Lithuanian version, will be presented. Standardization is related to all spheres of human activity and provides impact on it. Standards are generally perceived as being able to ensure the human well-being, given their ability to ensure equal treatment and to act as economic drivers in certain areas of life. Standardization covering a broad spectrum of social and economic life gives rise to a variety of subjects and entities. Activity-oriented approach as a practical philosophy allows conceptualizing standardization as a form of human activity and divides it into several distinct components: entities, subjects, goals, processes, tools, and results. Consequently, a systematic structural activity-oriented approach enables to investigate standardization as a complex human activity and define a structural model for standardization. Standardization is flexible collective activity within which individual contribution of each expert has a great impact on the goal system of standardization. The standardization activity pattern is similar at international, regional, and national levels. Standardization is usually carried out by the main standards body, which is based on the activities of specialized technical committees. Individual entities are one of the key elements in the structure of standardization activity. Standardization experts usually evolve from professional proficient in certain areas who are mandated to participate in standardization activities, or other people seeking to acquire knowledge and take interest in the benefits of standardization. Standardization activity is mostly dependent on experts coming from industry, business, state or public sectors, and having opportunities to communicate with representatives from public management and government sectors, research and consumer organizations, as well as other agencies. Experts, the most important standardization entities are considered. The International Standard Classification of Occupations, developed by the International Labour Organization, as well as Lithuanian Standard Classification of Occupations, list the occupation related to standardization activities within physical science group. Out of more than 5,500 occupations terms included in the Lithuanian Classification of Occupations, only 2 have the component standardization within the terms standardization engineer and standardization technician. It should be noted that there is no formal vocational training for standardization experts. The 2 groups of entities, individuals and collective, are closely related. The individual belongs to a social and professional community, and by participating in the standardization activity, express corporate or mandated bodies rather than his or her personal opinion. Standardization activities are carried out at 3 levels. At each level, international, regional, and national, the technical committees operate as collective entities, consist of their mandated representatives. Complexity and multi-level quantity of standards entities give rise to the need for interpersonal, cross-sectoral, and inter-organizational communication within standardization activity, which in its turn requires interoperability and knowledge relating to more than one branch. The institutional boundaries between Lithuanian libraries, museums, and archives, the diversity of founders, differences in subordination, and the lack of common administrative unit coordinating important standardization issues faced by memory institutions suggest that standardization activities could be cross-sectoral partnership. Mandated representatives voluntarily carry out their duties and express their opinion that enhance the overall interbranch standardization movement. So we can talk about the role of standardization in the process of integration of memory institutions. The digital integration of cultural resources belonging to libraries, museums, and archives is a multi-level process closely related to preparation and application of normative documents, the development of a standardization process involving the new standardization entities and objects. After the end of 1998, the Lithuanian Standards Board, LST, applied to the National Library of Lithuania, an institution with extensive experience in adopting ISO standards, taking into account the growing desire to implement international standards and establish a special technical committee. In the same year, the technical committee, LSTTC 47, Library Science, was set up and standardization activities began in libraries. The development of national standards for librarianship, bibliography, and publishing began based on international standards. Since 2003, the National Library has been like the supervising institution involving libraries, museums, archives, public and private offices to standardization activity. As set up, only representatives from the major Lithuanian libraries were mandated to the committee. All mandated experts number has grown from 5 at the start up to 23, representing various institutions, including museums and archives, and the title of the committee was changed to LSTTC 47, Information and Documentation. In 2007, the Technical Committee 47 formed a new temporary working group. Some representatives from the Lithuanian Central State Archives participated in European Committee for Standardization Technical Committee cinematographic works in the preparation of 2 draft standards for identification of films. This expert group process resulted in 2 European standards, enhancing interoperability of metadata and film identification, minimum set of metadata for cinematographic works. LSTTC 47 is a mirror committee of ISO TC 46 information and documentation. The scope of LSTTC includes standardization of information and documentation activity, metadata, bibliographic format, publishing, international standard, numbering system, terminology. In February 2002, the Lithuanian Standards Board became an observer member of all the 4 subcommittees of ISO TC 46, information and documentation. CC, technical interoperability, statistics and performance evaluation, identification and description, as well as archives records management. In May 2018, ISO TC 46 registered the Lithuanian Standards Board as P member. This is a very important challenge and the opportunity to be closer to the international standardization and to be more involved in the development of information and documentation standards. In 2019, the Lithuanian expert was appointed to ISO TC 46 Working Group for Terminology of Information and Documentation. The goal of standardization is commonly referred to as establishing an approach to general and reusable use to achieve an optimal procedures of order in a particular field. In view of the application of ISO TC 46 information and documentation in the context of digital cultural integration of member institutions, it can be assumed that only a small part of the standards applied for partnership activities in libraries, museums, and archives. One of them is ISO 5127, Information and Documentation, Foundation and Vocabulary. Standardization relating to libraries and other memory institutions, publishing, information science in general, but none of them can exist without terminology. Terminology standard, information and documentation, foundation and vocabulary provides a concept system and general vocabulary for the field of documentation within whole information field. The second edition of a terminology standard was issued in 2017. The scope of the vocabulary provided in this document corresponds to that of ISO TC 46, standardization of practices relating to libraries, documentation and information centers, publishing, archives, records management, museum documentation, indexing and abstracting services, and information science, and to include more than 2,000 terms and definitions. The standards contribute to the Sustainable Development Goal 4, quality education, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. ISO Information and Documentation, Foundation and Vocabulary is one of the 484 standards helping to meet Sustainable Development Goal 4. It is important to mention the maintenance of ISO 5127 as a smart standard. Its mean standards machine applicable, readable, and transferable. ISO TC 46 is developing the web version of terminology standards using SKOS to describe terminology of information and documentation semantically. The implementation of vocabulary link data service can link various resources inside of and outside ISO, so terminology standard versions in Lithuanian languages will be included too. The set of terms of this huge number and subject scope posed serious challenges when translating into Lithuanian. According to the new procedure of National Standardization Body LST, the translation company that won the public procurement tender translate the standard into Lithuanian. The discussion of terms and their definition took place in LST with the participation of LST terminologist, translator, and LST TC47 representative. The discussion took several months. Later, the State Commission of the Lithuanian language reviewed and discussed the standard of terminology. It took a few more months. So overall, the translation, discussions, and approval processes took about a year. Several more months passed before the LST prepared the final version for publication. The Lithuanian version of International Terminology Standard, Information and Documentation, Foundation and Vocabulary, in March 2019, in Lithuanian was released. All concepts and definitions of Lithuanian version of ISO standard we can find at the Lithuanian Standard Board, Lithuanian National Standardization Body website terminology database. Representative of memory institution who are member of LSTTC 47 in the discussion of the parts of the terminology standard related to archives, record management, conservation, museum documentation were invited to participate. They participate on the voluntary nature and provided comments and suggestions, thus demonstrating their understanding of the common meaning and value of terminology for the whole community of memory and heritage institutions, as well as the sustainability of cross-sectoral cooperation in standardization activity. About 10 years ago, the survey of activities and development of LSTTC 47 information and documentation were realized. Based on the analysis of the technical committee activities, after a significant transformation of technical committee, a very competent group of experts was established. It is not an easy task to find experts capable to represent the organization at LSTTC 47, Information and Documentation. In spite of this, on the national level of the standardization activity entities, it was found that experts from LSTTC 47, Information and Documentation are of high qualification and hold key positions in their institutions. Libraries, museums, archives, and government institutions, such as Office of Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania and Ministry of Culture, mandated their representative to the technical committee. In many cases, there is a lack of direct support from administrative staff for this voluntary activity. Usually, there are no special standardization units in Lithuanian memory institutions. Due to the busy expert schedule, it would be great to include these activities in their core job responsibilities. Finally, I'd like to highlight one key issue. Standardization could be seen as a form of cross-sectoral partnership in memory institutions. Mandated representative, a significant standardization entity, able to understand the complexity of standard, this specialized nature of standardization activities, and apply its knowledge to the integration processes of cultural and standardized memory institutions. Understanding, knowing, learning information and documentation terminology is a strong link between and pillar of communication connected communities. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Nijole. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Apparently there are some problems with the video file. But I still want to ask you to share more about your experience with working in the ISO subcommittee, first as an observer and now as a member. In what ways would you say has it been useful and maybe in some ways benefited the situation in terminology and standardization? Your mic is off.
Sorry, thank you for your question. Our experience, our National Technical Committee experience as team member is not too long because we start only 2 years ago. But all our competent and skilled experts said that they have do more than when we were observer member, and so how I mentioned this is on voluntary basis, all our work, but we have very skilled and good experts, and we are involved and engaged in this activity. So we are very happy to have this very good group of experts.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully we'll hear from you in a few years, and maybe you'll be able to share some more experiences and developments.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for now, and we can swiftly continue with our next speaker, which is Meelis Somelar from the National Library of Estonia.
Hello, is my audio now?
Yes, we can hear you.
At first, let me introduce myself. My name is Meelis Somelar, and I am working at the National Library of Estonia. And there, one of my working tasks is to teach catalogers how to create authority records. And more often than not, I'll get also my own hands dirty, creating new authority records and updating bibliographic records. So I consider myself to be quite a practical man. And now I'm giving this presentation at this terminology conference subject, what I reckon to be more on a theoretical side. I still hope that my presentation would have some value as a view from a side. But before I am going to my first slide, I'd like to tell you what I learned about theory and practice maybe about 10 years ago in my previous working life when I was visiting my Latvian colleagues. Once again, visiting their office, I saw a note attached to the office wall. And this note stated, "Theory is when you know everything, but nothing works. Practice is when everything works, but no one knows why. In our department, theory and practice are combined, nothing works, and no one knows why." So most probably this wasn't my Latvian colleague's original observation, because this note was written in English, but nevertheless, I found it to be most insightful. But now, after we learned how to distinguish between theory and practice, let's talk about the implementation of RDA in Estonia. So let's making some timeline. And it was June 2010 when the original RDA was released. And as you see, it took Estonians only 7 years to establish a body whose goal is to promote the implementation of ADA. So, but you see here an acronym of ELNET, and let's make a quick detour and see what this ELNET is. And basically, it's a network of institutions that take interest in developing library services. And as you see, it was founded already 25 years ago. And it has Estonian two biggest cities, also the more important libraries, universities as members, and also more important memory institutions, some archives and museums. This institution, this ELNET, it's quite influential. And what's very important is that all the decisions there are consensus-based. So sometimes if you want to innovate something, it seems that to do this is like steering a 500,000-ton oil tanker. It's nearly impossible to make sharp turns. So let's go ahead, and in 2018 in a journal Raamatukogu, what means library in English, a series of articles were published about RDA. And these articles were very good introduction to this new standard, and such themes as entities, their attributes, relations, also the connection of RDA to AACR and how to behave with RDA in mark environment was also touched. And then after a couple of months, the RDA, the implementation of RDA was written into data strategy of the National Library. So we could say this is the real starting point of implementing the RDA in Estonia. And the same year, 2019, it was also decided that RDA glossary is to be translated. And the translation was finished this year. And it was quite interesting to hear from the previous speaker, as in Lithuania, the standard was translated in 2-3 months, but in Estonia this took much more time, and before the translation was officially finalized, even the new official RGA toolkit was introduced. So next, yes, as you see, this year the RGA glossary is finished. Now a little bit about translating the RGA reference. When Lithuanians just bought in the translation from a company, Estonian solution was to let it to be translated by Mrs. Sirje Nilbe, who has previously for years worked in Estonian National Library and has a very big experience. But of course, as she did it just by herself, it took nearly 2 years. But of course, all the time, through the process of translation, the new terms and definitions were also discussed extensively at ELNET RGA working group. So, yeah, as I said, this June it was finally finished. And this period of time, nearly 2 years, it indicates that there should have been some challenges in translation. And what these were. RGA has brought along a very profound change in conceptual system of cataloging. And it's imperative then that the translator, when translating, would also comprehend all the terms and definitions, but say such terms as is aggregator agent of, it's quite challenging one. And also sometimes the definitions are quite ungainly and hard to grasp. And here on the screen you see the definition of this term is aggregator agent of. Then sometimes it proved quite difficult to find good Estonian equivalent for several English terms. Say, if we take such English language words as wisdom, prudence, acumen, in Estonian the equivalent for all of them is one word, tarkus. And sometimes this makes quite difficult to find a good solution for when translating certain term. And as you see that as an illustration here, the Oxford English Dictionary has approximately 600,000 word forms, while I've estimated that in Estonian language there are about 250,000 words. I also found in the web estimations that say in Latvian language there are some more than 300,000 words. And one more difficulty, Estonian and English, they are belonging to totally different language families. As Estonian together with Finnish, they are Uralic languages, and English, but also Latvian, Lithuanian languages are Indo-European languages. And this results that Estonian and English have very different syntactic rule sets. But fortunately, the Finnish translation of the glossary was already available by this time, so our translator would sometimes use the Finnish translation as some kind of template. And here I show you some examples where you see that sometimes when translating from English to Estonian, some words basically just had to be dropped. And now just to compare here with the Finnish language. As you see here, some similarities. Then when translating, there were coined new terms and even totally new words. Some of the new words were just compound words when two existing words were combined, like integrating work, and the Estonian counterpart is translated as lõimteos. But here are also totally new words. The counterpart for aggregate is liitum, which is totally new word. So now what comes next? The RDA terms, some of them are introduced through library dictionary. But what is the library dictionary? It's a professional vocabulary database, and it's held by National Library of Estonia. And currently it contains a little bit more than 6,700 records. And all these terms are approved by Terminological Committee of Estonian Librarians Association. And Estonian Librarians Association is a professional organization, and its main objective is development of librarianship. And this Terminology Committee also manages the content of the library dictionary. And it's quite popular among the Estonian librarians. As you see, in the year 2020, more than 11,000 inquiries were made. And here are some screenshots of this dictionary. And basically, you can see that the terms here have also provided with English, German, Finnish, French, and Russian counterparts. Now, regarding RDA terms, it was decided that all of the RDA glossary terms are not to be added to the library dictionary, and it was decided that there would be 78 RDA terms added. And that's because a lot of RDA terms just won't have much don't have a good place in this dictionary, as they are belonging to the RDA environment. So, and it's now that in the nearest future, the contents of the library dictionary would be conjoined with EKILEX, the terminology database of Estonian Language Institute. And as Estonian Language Institute is the main body that is responsible for the standardization of Estonian language, so the RDA terms will be searchable in an environment where more than 70 different specialized terminology databases reside. And all the RDA terms have also the mentioning of source RDA in the library, source reference. And now at the end, some concluding remarks from a practice. Hopefully this my pronunciation of this Latvian words is too much off, but I found that there is not good antonym for the English word of theorist. And what I have seen when I am teaching the cataloguers and other specialists, both from the Estonian National Library, but also from other libraries, is that at the moment the knowledge about RDA is very limited. And it may be because they haven't seen what's the real benefit of using RDA. And at the moment, I don't see that the ordinary specialist would consult glossary about RDA terms. And I have also said that the existing Estonian language materials are also too long and complicated, and so probably some RDA for dummies, maybe 10-15 pages to get some easy introduction would be good. And to conclude more on a positive note, I would say that in order to successfully link data of different cultural institutions, combining theory and practice is very important. And what I mean is that frontline workers, but also middle management should become more knowledgeable about RDA and its benefits. And I think a good way to reach this goal is to implement some smaller scale projects in library realm. And regarding this, the presentation of our Finnish colleague, Mikko Lapalainen, was very encouraging. And this is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Meelis. And there's a question from our listeners and watchers here today of whether you plan to introduce any of the RDA terms to any other cultural institution in Estonia, apart from libraries.
We would, of course, would like to see that the terms would get hold in different kinds of institutions, but I think that at the moment there is some problem in that it's hard to see the benefits of using RDA. And as I said, I hope when there are some real projects, then also the popularity of RDA would grow.
Okay, thank you, understood. Well, we'll see the developments. Maybe your lucky example and good example will encourage and inspire others. Okay, thank you, Meeli. And
Thanks.
thus we have arrived at the final presentation of the day, which will be provided by my colleagues Inte Virbula and Maira Kreislere. And I also urge everyone to think about, everyone who's spoken today and given a presentation, to think about our last section of the conference and to think of at least one pro and one con of linking terminology between cultural institutions. So, okay, with that being said, Inta and Maira, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, we cannot share our screen before Melis is. Melis, oh, okay.
Yeah. Dear conference participants and guests, the theme of our presentation is implementation of the standard resource description and access in Latvian libraries and translation of their values and terms. As you heard before, there will be 2 speakers for this theme, and I will start. My name is Inta Virbule. I represent Data Knowledge Management Department of National Library of Latvia. And I will start with few slides about library terminology work in brief, as the implementation of resource description and access is connected with terms and terminology. First of all, I have to mention one important thing that is the key event in the development of national terminology, the establishment of Terminology Commission of the Latvian Academy of Sciences in 1946. I will not talk about the development of library terminology over time, but I want to accent 2 important moments. As you see, in 2000, Latvian Academy of Science Terminology Commission Subcommittee on Library Science, Bibliography, Book Science, and Information Science Terminology was established. And the second point is 2011, Terminology Commission was expanded by establishing a subcommittee on information and documentation terminology, also involving archival specialists. Currently, there are 11 library and related branch specialists who actively are involved in this subcommittee. And one more thing. There are just previously in other presentations mentioned our national terminology portal. And I'll also want to mention about this portal because it is a very important thing for our library specialists and also for other branch specialists because before this national terminology portal, there was a database, online terminology bank, archives, libraries, and museums, and with more than 3,000 terms and explanations. But in 2017, a new one database was established, Library, Archive, and Museum terms, and was released for users. The purpose of this database, developed and maintained by the National Library of Latvia, was to promote cooperation on terminologies used between cultural heritage institutions. In 2018, the National Terminology Portal started with a common platform to include the terms from different sectors. There is a possibility to edit and to create new terms. The Terminology Portal provides access to information from more than 96 collections of terms in a number of languages. The Latvian National Terminology Portal also includes data from ACADTERM database as well as terms from the database of library, archive, and museum terms created by National Library of Latvia. In this year, in 2021, the terms from the National Library database were transferred and added to the National Terminology Portal as a collection, library, and archive terms. Now there are more than 2,242 entries in Latvian, English, Russian, and German languages, and you can search for terms in 9 languages generating and editing terms, and experts can suggest terms used in practice and purpose of new terms. More information about this portal you can see in this website. You see this address. And now I will give possibility to present the second part of our presentation to my colleague, Maira Kreislere.
Hello, good evening. My name is Maira Kreislere, and I am a head of Data and Knowledge Management Department, and I will continue our presentation. I will share with you our experience of implementation of the standard resource description and access in Latvian libraries and translation of RDA values and terms. The new philosophy of RDA is based on entities, their properties and relationships. Entity is an abstract class of key conceptual objects in the universe of human discourse that is a focus of interest to users in a resource discovery systems. There you can see some of main entities in library, archives, and museum data. In 2020, work was actively started on building relationships between the authority records of various entities. For example, a person has a relationship with a particular work, institution, or geographic name. The real challenge for terminology work is hundreds of new terms which are coming into Latvian. At 2010, a group of National Library experts started translation work on RDA glossary with approximately 520 terms. At the same time, experts started to study RDA principles, new entities, and relationships between them. It was very complicated to understand the way how cross-relationships are created. At 2012 and 2013, in the RDA glossary was added 728 new or revised terms. It was a very impressive addition. There were a lot of terms from the digital world and various terms of technical parameters of resources. The main goals and preconditions for implementation team were defined as to provide higher quality management of digital resources and openness of data to the web. The inclusion of data created by Latvian libraries in international data circulation and ensure the reusability of data. At 2016, the RDA Steering Committee agreed to integrate the IFLA library reference model into the further development of RDA. Year 2018 was marked by new information for translators. New entities, agent, collective agent, nomen, and time span have been added with attribute and relationship elements that are common to every entity. In April 2020, an updated version was published on the RDA Toolkit data website. The National Library Expert Working Group completed translation of the RDA reference at the end of 2020, and it's planned to submit to the RDA registry for publication in Latvian by the end of 2021. RDA reference includes all RDA elements, their definitions, related scope notes, and value vocabulary terms and definitions. The RDA community knowledge and experience is a great support for any library that wants to implement RDA. The RDA reference will play in the future an important role in the day-to-day work of Latvian library specialists, because without a unified terminology and understanding of concepts, the implementation of RDA is impossible. The term translating process must follow the principle that the chosen term in its appropriate sense is used throughout a document as well as in interrelated documents. Cross-sector terminology needs uniform understanding, and and the use of the term in documents of national significance. Highly reliable RDA data is a solid foundation on which to build common understanding of the description of cultural heritage resources. The idiosyncrasies of languages are noticeable. For example, the use of gender in the recording of roles of responsibility, authors, author, in English, author. In languages where these roles are expressed with a gender, translators are forced to decide on the use of the same gender role designator for persons of both sexes. In international practice, the male gender is accepted as the common gender designator. This was also accepted in the translation of the RDA glossary in Latvian. Another challenge is the extensive use of synonyms that is characteristic of the English language, and it's not always possible to successfully find a suitable term in Latvian. For example, in English, the terms publishing, releasing, issuing have different nuances, while in Latvian this is often denoted by one or two terms, izdošana, publicēšana, whose semantic meanings are very close. Representatives of non-English speaking countries, on the other hand, emphasize the problems in term explanations. The explanations are not suited to day-to-day work of data creators. The language is complicated and texts are very theoretical. Further problems arise with expressing of various entity relationships, which can be achieved in English with the help of short phrases. For example, adaptation of work. However, to express the same phrase in Latvian requires the use of grammatical declinations. When a new term is being introduced, several language equivalents can often be used in different sectors and documents. Such example is the Latvian language equivalent for the term entity. The appearance of entitāte, entitāja in library science and entitāte in IT sector in documents in different sectors. The choice of the most appropriate equivalent is still under discussion. It is not enough to find an appropriate Latvian word. The word must be provided with a precise explanation of the term in order for it to be used to describe various resources. At the same time, the term could be successfully integrated into international circulation. Term unmediated, for which a number of new words were tried initially, but they were unsuccessful and did not fit into everyday use. Nonetheless, a very successful term was eventually found that reveals the meaning of the term, tiešu stveres vide. Many sector-specific terms required understanding of the processes involved in the definitions. Real challenge was translating terms related to digital files. Given that it is often not easy to apply Latvian words that directly express the semantic meaning of these specific terms. Many of these terms are being used without translating them into Latvian. For example, master. We propose the term pirmatnis. These terms are widely used in the music and film industries, but which required research to apply equivalent Latvian terms. There you can see our proposals for these terms, prequel, sequel, remake. Views on the complexity of the entity relationship network are based on an insufficient understanding of the IFLA library reference model, entity hierarchies, and their relationships. During this mentioned project, the research of interoperability of RDA standard with the standards of the other cultural heritage institutions can help ensure the description of different types of resources, the identification of entities, and the creation of metadata suitable for further dissemination in the linked data environment. In this slide, you can see comparison of key entities relevant to the unified cultural heritage management. These standards differ in the degree of detail they use to describe the entity classes involved in structuring the information in their data models. For example, in the RDA standard, the collective agent entities is a superclass of the entities institution, group, and family. The authority data created by the National Library and the National Archives of Latvia will be the basis for the unified reference data system of Latvian cultural heritage institutions. The authority data will be cross-mapped and uploaded into the reference data system in co-creation environment. Agreement is needed on common key entities as harmonization of different data creation standards and models. In this slide, you can see our conclusions according to the RDA reference translating process. The result of the RDA reference translation is almost 5,000 updated and brand new Latvian terms useful for all cultural heritage institutions. Thank you for your attention. And please give your questions.
Yes, thank you, Inta and Maira. We have a question about whether there is an idea to include the newly translated RDA glossary terms in the terminology portal as a separate collection, and would that even be necessary? What would be the benefits of that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's planned. So after the terms will be published in the RDA registry, it will be most likely in 2022.
Okay, thank you. For the moment, we don't have any more questions for you, so we can move on to the next segment of our conference, which is the discussion. And so I will now ask everyone in the order of giving presentations to give a short conclusion, basically, about whether it's necessary, advisable to link the cultural institution data, and yeah, basically summarize it as a single pro and a single con, and maybe give a short commentary. So we can start with Renata, if you're still there.
Yes, I am. So I can start, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So I think in this few hours with this Congress today showed it very well that we will and we have to make conjunctions and common work with further communities of cultural institutions. And I only see pros for this, but the cons, sure, this is an expensive thing. It is not easy. It is difficult to fulfill. You need many people, volunteers to do this. But I think for the future, coming together in our cultural world, which comes closer and closer, is essential. And I don't see another way to do this. And the world has changed so much. And if we do not do this, it will be much more expensive later on. And I see a real internationalization for our standards and for our models must be multilingual. This is expensive and a lot of work as well. But I think this is a common solution for the outside the Anglo-American world, and I think this is very much important.
Thank you, Renata. And Mikko, what's your opinion on whether the cultural institution terminologies should be linked or should not?
Well, obviously, I think that they should be linked, and it would definitely be beneficial to all the parties to advance the interoperability of the data within the different sectors and in different organizations. and also as to sort of remain important in the wider context of the semantic web and the information available in the web in general. Of course, we have to pay attention to not sort of to lose the nuances of the different sectors. Libraries, of course, are dealing with a bit different materials than, for example, archives and museums. So there are, of course, differences. But there are many common points, and we should really come together in finding those common points and working towards interoperability in general.
Yes, thank you, Mikko. And we can continue with Edwards. What's your thoughts about should we link the terminology, should we not?
Well, I think it's a common agreement here that, of course, we are on the right road to accomplish a real data interoperability between different cultural heritage institutions. And we have already tools. A lot of tools are in the computer science and information science side, but that's okay. There are almost all of them are open source. The great example is Finnish National Library, actually, that developed Cosmos that we are using right now, and we are experimenting with it and how further to connect different thesaurus, different vocabularies between institutions. So yeah, we have tools, we have resources, and now we need to talk to each other. And actually, we are starting to doing it for some time now.
Okay, thank you. Got it. And Violetta, what are your thoughts? Same question, of course.
I'm sorry for my cognitive report, but of course I must notice the very detailed reports, and it would be very, very well if we had an open access to our reports, to our thoughts of this. And in future, I think that the time to prepare more detailed information about the latest works, the latest solutions and terminology every year maybe, but this needs a special format for our conversation. Maybe not a conference such we have a different time for preparing, but if we have a format for discussions or for publications, as a terminologist, as we work at the same field, it would be very nice. But I think we must to have or by mail or by other form to discuss it more widely, to have to collect the ideas for our meetings. Maybe not a terminology conference, maybe subclass, forums, or so over open forum, because you had much experience. I hear, thank you very much for this. I hear you have more experience in this, maybe workshop, maybe other forms, but of course to have the latest information, because we, over the year we have more and more databases, and it grew. So my proposal, maybe we have some convenient form, not a conference as a big deal of our, but more closely contacts, but then published, because very detailed reports is need to study later. So that's all.
Yeah, thank you for your suggestions. We'll see what we can do about that. And Baiba and Daina, what are your opinions about whether there are some only pros or maybe there are some cons to linking terminology?
We discussed with my colleague Daina, but of course it's very important to work together for all cultural heritage institutions and to develop such linked terminology. And but if I am looking from a perspective or idea of semantic web and knowledge organization systems, I think that there is a necessary to develop this linked terminology, because if if we want to map knowledge organization systems according to requirements of semantic web, then it would be very good if we have terminology which we understand in the same way. But of course, it's ask much of the job, and yeah, but I think it's the aim of semantic web to work also on terminology and commonly understandable terminology.
Yes, thank you. Probably everyone else agrees about the amount of work and the complicated issues that come with translations and everything. Yeah, Nijole, what are your concluding remarks about pros and cons of linking terminology? Do we have Nijole here? Okay, let's move on. Then to Meelis. Meelis, I see you're still here. So your list of pros and cons.
Sorry, it's very good to know what. Okay, thank you. It's very good to know that we are not alone faced to this terminology changes and the subject changes. It's very nice to meet you all and to see you all. And for my opinion, maybe it's very some utopic to have linked terminology in all level, in cross-sectoral, level, but I joined maybe to Violetta's opinion because we need more educational efforts. First of all, we can understand why this linked, so to say, terminology is used for. Why is need for libraries, for museums, for archives, for all other heritage institutions. And maybe this educational efforts, some common databases, and I hope that if ISO-TC 46 will do this vocabulary on semantic level and include our national translations of this terminology standards. This it will be a great step to this common understanding of our terminology. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Meelis?
Yes, I would say that when we bear in mind the huge benefits this interoperability would have for ordinary people, for end users, that's very, I would even say, a noble goal to go to. But at the same time, it seems to me that sometimes some institutions are reluctant to go towards these goals because they somehow feel themselves like maybe more important or very different as they are. But I think that we should start to win the ordinary people over to our side by starting to offer them some services that are based on RDA principles. And then when we have success with ordinary people, they can then put also pressure to other institutions so that also they could join in. These are my thoughts. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Probably I could speak for everyone and agree that maybe sometimes theorizing and conceptualizing these ideas is easier than actually applying them to practice and not maybe convincing, but making others understand why some changes might be needed and why they should change the ways they're used to doing things. Okay, and finally, Maira and Inte, what are your conclusions about pros and cons of linked terminology? Mic is off.
Yeah, sorry. It's nice to see you all, you all today, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. And my thoughts about this topic is when we start to creating the reference data system, the first step was already an agreement which has already been reached between the experts from library and archives and museums on the main key entities that will be representing in the reference system. It was a very great step to link our data together. And what can I say about usability of RDA terminology in our common environment? It's very important because RDA terms could be used as one of main vocabulary in common data creation environment for all these cultural heritage institutions. And I think the RDA terms will be usable especially for digital resources and special resources such as audio, video recordings, manuscripts, sheets, music, and etc. It's my opinion, my thoughts.
Yes, thank you for that. And with this, we've come to the closing of the Terminology Conference of 2021. And we would like to thank everyone who attended, who participated, who managed to get to the end. And hopefully everyone found something useful for them to take away with them and maybe even apply to practice someday in their institutions. And special thanks to our wonderful speakers, of course. It was really great to hear all your diverse and sometimes even common experiences, and also to consider things we might have not thought about on our own yet even. So I hope you all had a good time, and yeah, I hope we can meet again next year, and have a good rest of the Friday and a wonderful weekend. Thank you everyone. Goodbye.